uh, with much ado, I'll start this. Okay. Grief, the flow for the next 45-50 minutes is going to be like this. We're going to know what this grief is all about and how do we grieve, when should we grieve, and more importantly, why do we need to grieve any type of loss for that matter. And there's a saying that goes, oh, time heals everything. We're going to know, can time really heal, and can it heal everything? And there is what we call as healthy grieving and unhealthy grieving. We're going to understand what that is about. And also, when we grieve, what happens at the level of brain and our mind, and why that grieving can be healthy or unhealthy, we're going to see by understanding the changes that happens in our brain and mind. And some rewiring tools for grieving. This is the way the flow is going to be. Ultimately, the why for grieving is the most important aspect. We're going to understand this too. Grief, what are the reasons for grieving? The first and foremost, what comes to our mind is about death of a loved one. And we know it's not necessarily just death that causes us to grieve. Many other reasons like illness, our own illness, or somebody else's, our loved one's illness, if it is a chronic one, or if it's a terminally ill process, that also leads us to grieving. And not necessarily a death, but end of a relationship with our loved ones, and loss of job, unemployment. And we're seeing this, especially in the last 1 year or so, that how people are losing their jobs, and loss of property. We don't think about these things as that we grieve, but all of these are real reasons for a person to grieve. And what are the different dimensions of grieving? Usually we look at the emotional aspect of grieving, right? And not just emotional, it can be the physical dimension to grieving. The cognitive dimension, we're going to know about all of this when we understand what happens at the level of brain and mind when we grieve. Behavioral changes. Sometimes when we do not know how to grieve, without our knowledge, we get involved into certain, starts out as a not so healthy habits, many a times ending up in addictions too. Not knowing how to grieve or not knowing how to face any kind of trauma or illness might even result in behavioral changes leading to addiction. Many a times we don't look at the cause of addictions to be not knowing how to grieve in a healthy manner. It's a very important aspect for people to keep in mind. And also the social aspect, and of course, the spiritual and philosophical aspects. So, what is grief? Grief, as we know, is because of all those types of losses we talked about. And loss is a universal experience. Everybody in their lives, without any exception, will lose something or someone, their loved one, in their lifetime. So loss is an universal experience. And the grieving happens because of loss of something or somebody or anything for that matter. And we know that there is no right or wrong way of grieving. Everybody grieves in their own way. And we have not been taught to grieve in a healthy manner. So, this is another topic that is close to my heart because we might have lost somebody years back, but if we have not learned to grieve in a healthy manner, the effect of that we will still be seeing even until our last breath. So, irrespective of where we are in our lives and how long ago an experience has happened, it's important, in my view, to learn to grieve in a proper manner and in a healthy manner. And we're going to see what I mean by in a healthy manner. Just like I talk about forgiveness, that forgiveness is such an important aspect that every one of us, without any exception, has to learn how to forgive and why to forgive. Grieving is another topic that is common for each and every one of us. In fact, even for youngsters, young kids need to know how to grieve because we protect the younger ones. We don't take them to funerals. We don't explain to them what it means by death. But there are ways how we can educate and train even the kids, young kids, how to grieve, especially their loved ones, especially that of a parent. And young, not necessarily young just by age, below 10, even as teenagers, we would not know how to grieve when we lose our close parent and loved one. So let us learn how, even though there is no right or wrong way of grieving, there definitely is a healthy and unhealthy way. That is what we're going to understand about. And we know grieving is a journey, it's a process, and it's a journey to our recovery. We have read this, heard this, it's a journey to recovery if grieving is done in a proper way. But not always grieving leads to recovery. And not always grieving leads to healing also. This is where the catch is, to be able to grieve in a proper way, a healthy manner, so that it leads to recovery, so that it leads to healing. And we have heard it's a passing phase. Grieving is a passing phase. So time heals everything. So we're going to see, is this truly a passing phase? In my opinion, many times it's not just a passing phase. The after effects of grieving can remain in one person forever. But how it remains in our memory in a manner to uplift us or to bring us down is the point. That is where we're going to learn about this. So, as I said, we think time heals everything. But according to me, time heals nothing. It is what we do with that time actually heals. Heals in a manner. Healing means it has to be a recovery in a positive manner, right? It is, if I have to just give an example, it is like when somebody breaks a bone, if it is not immobilized, the bone will, if it's a fractured bone, it will heal. it can heal on its own, but it may not heal properly for us not to have the effect of healing in a negative manner. In the same way, grieving too. When we grieve, of course, it heals. Healing, as we say, it's a common word. We say as time passes, the person has healed, but has that healing left scars? That scarring can be painful. Scarring can cause suffering. This is where we need to understand. Just allowing the time to pass and saying that grieving is a passing phase is not the right way to look. We need to be able to understand what grief is so that we can heal in a healthy manner, so that we can actually evolve from this, not just survive through a loss. So let's try and see and understand grief and go a little bit deeper into grief and see. So this is the time. Maybe we can take probably 60 seconds or 2 minutes to see if people wants to ask us any questions about what type of grieving they are looking for. Is it of their loved one? As I've already said, that is one of the common ones. If there is anything specific that you are looking from this talk, either please raise your hand and then say it out, or you can put it on the chat box. Shivani, we will take 90 seconds or so and wait, or else anybody has anything specific to ask for. Shivani, you're muted.
Sure. Yeah. As we said, the topic is related to loss from any reason, and sometimes it's often not recognized if it's in that format, especially if there's loss of employment through retrenching, loss of purpose, change in position in life that alters what you did previously.
True. Sometimes, some of the happy things also leads to grieving. As we wait, I'm just going to introduce this. I don't know, in this culture, you talk about empty nest syndrome, which is when a kid, when I say kid, a teenager goes away to college from home. We know that is that, yeah. I say that even in this culture, you talk about that emptiness syndrome. It's a happy occasion, but yet I know people who have gone into deep depression when their only child has left home to study in a university and does not call mom or dad every day and not keep in touch. That's a perfect example, not knowing how to grieve, Okay, if there are no questions, we will move on, Shivani, unless you have anything, Shivani.
No, I think you touched on an important aspect, because I think with the current problems that we've had in this country, one of the challenges is the loss of the family structure through immigration. And recently there was a South African paper looking at the impact of immigration on the family left behind, not on the impact of the immigration on the family moving away. And the experiences felt during those interviews were the impact of the family that were left behind were akin to grief and the stages of loss from bereavement, in a sense. And even in the age of social media, it was still not as fulfilling in terms of the loss people were experiencing, which I found very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my favorite phrase, as always, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. We will see how this represents with respect to grieving in a while. So when you see this picture, either you can see a lady wearing a winter jacket walking in the on a pavement road, or the coat of the lady is like the nose of a man that you can see. The sky is actually, the white sky is the forehead. So just to give you what I mean by when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at will change. But with respect to grieving, I come back again to saying, is this a passing phase? I say it shouldn't just be a passing phase. We need to make use of this time and the process of grieving, not just for the time to pass, make it a passing phase, but a great opportunity to evolve ourselves. Because again, even before going further, taking that example of empty nest syndrome, see, when we use just simple logic, because that is supposed to be a happy occasion, the same way people migrating to different places is what Shivani said. If we just change the perspective, rather than focusing on ourselves, how we are losing the time that we spend with that loved one, if we start focusing on others, that they are going to make a new beginning in their life, then the whole thing changes. So simple, but yet difficult to accept and follow, and we will see why from a neuroscience perspective. So if we can make this time of grieving as a way to evolve, which means not focusing on ourselves, the first thing is to focus on others and see the changes that has happened. I'm talking with respect to either losing someone or loss of a relationship or physically being away. Under these circumstances, what I'm saying right now will hold good, but we will see what happens in other circumstances as we move along. But if we take, especially the majority of us relate to grieving with respect to losing a loved one, or we have lost our loved one long time back, not knowing how to handle that grief. See, we are trying to remember to forget certain things, and we are trying to forget to remember certain things. I want you to keep this in the back of your mind as we move along. And what do I mean by this statement? We definitely need to remember to forget certain things, and we will see what that is. But will it happen automatically? Can we remember to forget certain things and forget to remember certain things? Will it happen automatically? I say absolutely not. We truly have to understand and analyze what is it that we need to remember and what is it that we need to forget. And that is a willful, conscious, deliberate effort to be doing this. Forgetting to remember and to remembering to forget. So, Earl Grolman is one of the specialists in grieving. He made his career in counseling for the grieving process. And his statements are just amazing. Just read it out because it is so profound, you know. Grief is not a disorder. It's not a disease, nor a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. Look at the choice of words. He says it is a necessity. Grieving is a necessity. And it is the price that you pay for loving somebody. When you look at it this way, grief is the price we pay for love. That itself changes how we look at the grieving process, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. And the only cure for grief is to grieve. If we can understand this statement. It is so profound and so powerful. The only cure for grief is to grieve. Then we certainly need to understand and to learn how to grieve in a proper manner. So we will get into why of grieving, but before that, let's again go a little bit deeper into understanding grief itself. You would have heard about this, read about this easily. You can get these things on internet. So I'm just going to touch upon it and then move on, because initially you're in the denial stage, which turns into anger, leading to depression and bargaining that loss, and finally accepting the loss. And how do we accept this loss? Is it in a healthy manner or is it in an unhealthy manner? Because this is the whole crux. How do we accept? Because the time will pass, we'll go through these 4 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Whether you know how, whether to do it in a healthy manner or not, none of that matters when we are going through these 4 stages. But ultimately, when you come to that acceptance stage, is where everything comes around. How do we accept this? Is it because of fate, destiny, that we didn't have much choice? What else to do? You have to accept and move on. Trying to forget, not able to forget? Or do we do it in a healthy manner? Forgetting the right things and remembering the right things too. Or forgetting the wrong things and remembering the right things, rather. So again, when we look at that statement, when we change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Can we make this grieving as a spiritual journey? Even though I say it is a spiritual journey, I'm not bringing any moralistic approach or any religious approach. Even that spiritual journey, we're going to look at it from a scientific perspective, neuroscience perspective. And what I mean by spiritual journey is what we call it as evolving from a scientific angle. So I keep going back again, trying to remember the right thing and wanting to forget. Let's go just a bit deeper into this, because this is extremely important for us to understand this properly. Many times in the initial stages, we forget what we want to remember of a situation or of the person. And we remember what we want to forget. Again, it might seem as a general statement, an ambiguous statement. I will go a little bit deeper so that we understand. Let's take an example of a loved one, losing our loved one. We are trying to remember but we want to forget the painful things we want to forget, and we want to remember the happy memories, but it won't let us. So what we say is the distressing memories will pop into our mind even when we don't want them. And these distressing memories, we call them as intrusive memories. And these intrusive memories are extremely common in the bereavement process. We just have to accept this. Nothing wrong in us remembering the painful aspect of last few days, last few months, or last few moments of the life of our loved one. The memories of the illness, all the things that you went through with your loved one, or the pain that your loved one went through, and the suffering the entire family went through, and what kind of trauma is left behind. We want to forget these things, but yet it is almost impossible to forget, even though we want to forget this. We want to remember the good memories, but the painful ones are the ones that keep coming back. Why? Again, just to touch upon it, is because of our negativity bias that is innate and inherent within us. It is impossible to come out. But we need to remember this. It's only because of the innate negativity bias is why we cannot come out of those painful memories, the visual memories of the last few moments or the last few days of losing our loved one. This is where again science can help, but not to take this too personally, but to know that those good memories are not gone. Those good memories are not gone from our memories, from our mind. And we have to make an effort, a willful effort, deliberate effort, conscious effort to remember them. And it does take time. How long it takes? It differs from one person to another. Now that we know this is the process, hopefully we will be able to hasten up, to decrease that time, and to put effort, not just more and more effort. We have to figure out the ways, different types of effort. Again, that will differ from one family to another. This is where we can take this up in the Q&A session. What are the efforts that we need to put to be able to remember good memories? In other words, it's very important to keep the memories alive of our loved ones, whether immediately or in the long term. But because the intrusive memories harm us, causing us trauma right now, we try not to remember even the good memories. But again, important to know that it is important to keep the person alive in our memories. If you don't do this, again, because of the negativity bias that is innate within us, when we don't understand this process, it results in guilt or regret. Regret that we cannot remember good things, and guilt because we're remembering all the wrong things that has happened. So only through knowledge can we come out of this. Knowledge of the negativity bias can we overcome any of this. And again, one more aspect is to take away taking the focus away from us and putting the focus back to our loved one, training our mind to be able to have beautiful, good memories, irrespective of whether it is immediate or long term. Does not matter, even if it is been decades that you have lost your loved ones. So now I'm going to take you through this chart, walk you through this chart to see if you want to know how to do healthy grieving and how do we evolve from this process of grieving. Okay, let's take the first aspect of how guilt affects. There are two ways, when we grieve, it's either because of grief, guilt, or because of the real loss. Guilt happens because the most common thing, we have not spent enough time with our loved one. or the memories that you were planning on a vacation, or you're planning so many things, but you keep putting things off because of procrastination. And so that leads to guilt. When grieving leads to guilt, this is where it is unhealthy. It might have happened. You might not have been able to spend as much time as you'd have wanted to. And especially if the loss of the death one is sudden, either because of an accident or because of some terminal illness that comes about really, really quickly, that guilt is there in everybody at that time. So which is unhealthy. This is where one needs to be able to learn to forgive oneself. It's extremely important to learn to forgive. That's why that you see again and again and again, either grieving or forgiving, always they all go together, as a matter of fact. So when we learn to forgive, even though we might have felt guilty to begin with, even though it is unhealthy, one way to change that is to learn to forgive and put that grief into action. What do I mean by that? We will take that up in the Q&A session, because if I go into those methods of putting grief into action to learn to forgive and then to overcome, it will take more time. We will either take it up in the Q&A session, and we will also come about with some of the tools. So this is the way we evolve. Even though it has started because of guilt, you can change that, even that unhealthy one, to a healthy one, once we learn to forgive ourselves. So, okay, we're not guilty, but we are just grieving for the loss of a loved one, let us say. Again, there are two ways, healthy way and unhealthy way of grieving. What is the unhealthy way? Unhealthy way is to going into depression or becoming anxious or getting stressed out because we don't understand the grieving process. Before we understand this grieving process, we try to manage ourselves, and that is where it can lead to unhealthy way. So once we go through, whether it could be depression or anxiety, any of these, because of either loss of a loved one or loss of a job or loss of a relationship that happens, then we need to dig deeper and to say, why is this happening? I always say the scientific way of looking into things is go deeper, go into why is this happening to me? That is when we will find the answers. And as they say, if you ask this why 5 times, all of us will come to the same answer, I can assure you. So that is the way to evolve. Even though you might have started out as an unhealthy manner, once we understand this grieving process, which we are yet to do, and we are going to get into why that affects and how it affects at the level of brain and mind, then we can change that into asking that why and what do I need to evolve. And of course, the healthy way of dealing with grieving because of any type of loss is to go through it, not to ignore, not to avoid, but to go through it. And this is where the time really heals. When we keep reflecting on things, then we go through in a healthy manner and we can recover, and we will remember the things that need to be remembered, and we will forget the things that pull us down and remember the things that will bind us together, increase the love to that person, even though person may not be physically close or physically not present. It is still possible to keep us close to us through our memories in a healthy manner. So ultimately, irrespective of how we have started to grieve in an unhealthy manner or not, it is possible to convert all of that depending on different ways of dealing with this and to be able to evolve through this process. So we have to remember to forget and forget to remember. I told you this is the catchphrase for the grieving process. You have to remember to forget the wrong memories or the memories that pull us down, and we have to again forget and remember the right ones. So now let's look into how does the brain react to this grieving process. Very, very simple. We have been talking about the higher center of the brain or the lower center of the brain. I've even made it into even simpler. The higher center of the brain, which is nothing but here we're talking about the thinking center or the rational center or the CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and also the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the part of the brain that connects the prefrontal cortex to the underlying centers of the brain. And this is the part that helps us to regulate our emotions, the ACC. Both this, the prefrontal cortex and the ACC, become underactive. And contrary to these two becoming underactive, the amygdala, it is the little almond-shaped structure that lies a little bit deeper in the brain, that becomes overactive. And at many times we use the technical term for this amygdala becoming overactive as hijacking, amygdala hijacking. Because when the higher cortex is quite active, the amygdala is calm and it is relaxed, and that is how we want it to be. Whereas the higher cortex, the prefrontal cortex or the ACC, becomes less and less active. That is when amygdala becomes highly active. And this is the cause for many of the things that we go through. Of course, we want the amygdala to be active in certain circumstances, but not during this grieving process. Because this is where we become highly emotional, when the amygdala gets hijacked and does not allow the higher cortex to work properly. Then we become so emotional that, at least with respect to grieving, that is where all the emotions or the afflictive emotions like anger, fear, frustration, and sometimes hate or disgust, for if there is a cause for a sudden death of the loved one, we can even get into hatred and getting so angry for a particular cause, either of the illness itself or with the doctors and whatnot. So when we understand this, then we need to know how we can calm this amygdala down. How to make this amygdala underactive, and so that the higher center of the brain or the higher cortex, whether the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, or the ACC become more and more active. Because when the amygdala gets hijacked, and especially I say fear is the mother of all negative emotions. This is where a lot more of the negativity thinking comes about. As I keep saying, automatic negative thoughts, they increase because of the hijacking of amygdala, or amygdala becoming overactive. All that negative thinking results in one feeling, which is of deep sadness. And if we don't know how to handle this, that is where, for many people, leads to depression. They will be doing everything as though nothing has happened. But deep within that sadness leading to depression is the cause. Many a times, as medical professionals, we don't recognize this. Just asking the person what type of repetitive thoughts the person gets is enough, because sometimes their loved ones might have passed away years back, and you may not even think about the person in a conscious manner. At a subconscious level, not knowing how to deal with this loss is what causes deep sadness and leading to depression. So as medical professionals, if we don't dive deeper into this is what causes a lot more issues much later in the family, not having the healthy interpersonal relationship with other loved ones. Because a simple act of grieving can lead to a traumatic experience for that loved one if he or she is still young, not knowing how to deal with this. And it happens more so with men, because men not knowing how to express these emotions, not knowing how to cry for that grieving, because we feel, especially in many cultures, men are not supposed to cry, not supposed to show their emotions. Although crying is such therapeutic in such cases, we do not know how to use crying in a therapeutic manner. So just understanding how the brain works during the grieving process, and it could be years later, just some thought might trigger, and again this is what is happening in the brain. We can understand this and we'll be able to deal with this. Why is this so important to understand? Why this amygdala gets hijacked? So our mind goes back and forth like a pendulum between past and future, and we will look at the past with guilt and regret, and the future is filled with fear and anxiety and pessimism. And present, we will deal with guilt and regret. Even the present moment is filled with regret and guilt and anxiety and fear in the present moment. Depending on our personality, it could be regret and guilt in some, or anxiety and fear in some others, or all of this in the same person at different times. This is where it is confusing even for medical professionals. This is where we really need to dissect and understand this grieving process to be able to see what is happening in the present moment and to learn to deal with this. And when that happens, as I said, again, another way of saying this, we look at the past with regret. So we cannot forget some of the painful memories. And we look at the future with anxiety and pessimism, and we cannot remember some of the good memories that is associated with the loss of the person. And the present moment is unsatisfactory to us. And we look at the way of grieving is to ignore and avoid. Or we know time heals everything, so we wait for time to pass. This is the culprit. If we can understand this, this is what is happening in each and every one of us, irrespective of what type of loss this is. This is the most important one. And how do we deal with this? As we have talked about this many times, and we have done a series on this mindfulness, we can go back and check on those links to understand, because I'm not going to go into this tool, mindfulness. Being mindful, we need to be in that mindful moment, be in the present moment, here and now, now and here. Train our minds to remember the good memories and train our minds to forget the painful ones. I will tell you by personal experience how hard it is. But the only way out is through that and through knowledge. And we need to be intellectually convinced about this scientific process of healthy grieving. And then, and only then, will we be able to be mindful of our grieving too. So coming back again, understanding grief is that grief is not a problem to be solved, nor is it a disease to be treated, but an opportunity to evolve, irrespective of what type of loss this is. So, how? What are the tools? Antidote for grief? I just mentioned just two important tools, and that is to be mindful, to be in the now, and to develop an attitude of gratitude. Whenever I talk or do bereavement counseling or bereavement talks or grief management, and especially even when I talk to the counselors about bereavement process, the most important aspect is to develop an attitude of gratitude. I can just say this and then close, or because I'm not going to go into the mindfulness, you can check the links that the organizers can share. But Shivani, if we have time, I would like to quickly take another 5 or 6 minutes to go a little bit deeper into the science of developing an attitude of gratitude. Do we have the time?
Yes, sure.
Sure. So, not dealing with mindfulness, let us go a little bit deeper into developing an attitude of gratitude. You know, gratitude is not just an act. It should become a habit. And a habit that we put in ourselves in an intentional manner, with intention, so that we can recognize the positive aspects of our own lives and the time that we spent with our loved ones. And the things that bring us joy, we need to recognize the things that bring us joy and make our lives meaningful and make our lives complete and make our lives purposeful. When we give this definition of gratitude, you can see how powerful developing an attitude of gratitude is. And again, gratitude is not just a spontaneous reaction to say thank you, right? We say so quickly thank you to something good that has happened. And it's not just a shallow, automatic passing of saying thank you. And it's not an occasionally expressing meaningful, well-intended, habitual, but conventional thank you. Just like anything else, that thank you becomes so mechanical. And we think, and especially religious people, I have observed, that showing gratitude, oh, we're so grateful to this and to that, including God, it becomes such a mechanical process. This is where religious people and spiritual people have to be so cognizant and so conscious about it so that it doesn't come in a mechanical way. I always say this, just like when japa done in a mechanical way, yes, it helps, I'm not saying, but when it is done in a conscious manner, when it is done in a mindful manner, the power of japa is very different. It is the same way saying grateful for the things and not just quick way of saying grateful for something bigger and greater or for that person. Take few seconds, and when you say that thank you, mean it. Just like I say, we train our breath. One breath is enough to bring us back to this present moment. Train yourself to say, when you say that thank you, just closing your eyes and deeply feeling that is the way to truly be grateful. And when you practice that, you will see the power of being grateful. We don't even have to use the word grateful, that we are grateful to God. Our actions show. Otherwise, if we are quick in being grateful to God or saying thank you, it may not result in action all the time. Much more than just saying, we need to focus on the actions. So, showing gratitude in a conscious manner with willful effort is the way to go. And showing gratitude on a regular, consistent, and systematic manner. And it's a cognitive process and not an emotional process. I'm saying the same thing in many different ways so we can get it the right way. So expressing gratitude, this is the science of gratitude, you know. Expressing gratitude literally changes the molecular structure of the brain, and especially when it is followed by action. And gratitude exercises help both healthy individuals and also those struggling with mental health concerns, like here with grieving. And being grateful influences positive behaviors and also pro-social behaviors. And effects of gratitude have long-lasting effects, and especially when it is followed by our actions, because just to remind many of you, because I know you're following our talks and workshops through Ramakrishna Center here, that we keep saying, just thinking positive is not enough. Just feeling positive is not enough. Both positive thinking and positive feelings have to be followed by positive actions for to see long-lasting changes in the structure of our and function of our brain, and also long-lasting changes in our lives. And this whole process is neuroplasticity, as you know. Just a reminder, that's all. So gratitude also activates pathways releasing quote unquote feel good chemicals in the brain. So much so we can actually say developing an attitude of gratitude can be a natural Prozac. There you go, another idea for research. So anyway, what is the influence of gratitude on us? By just developing gratitude, other virtues like patience, humility, and wisdom, they follow. Just like they say, if you take one thing and work on that, and everything else will fall in place. This is it, developing gratitude. And gratitude functions as a social glue that nurtures relationships. And gratitude improves our physical and psychological health, our mental health, with increased happiness and life satisfaction. And studies have shown that people who are grateful are less likely to suffer from burnout. And the other way I say is, easier yardstick for that is, people who are grateful will have a lot more energy left at the end of the day to spend their meaningful time with their loved ones, and to be doing things that what they would like at the end of a day, a long day. And when it happens day in and day out, then you know you're truly developing an attitude of gratitude. That is a sure way of knowing that we are developing an attitude of gratitude, and that's a great yardstick. And gratitude interventions, what are those? Counting one's blessings and writing letters of gratitude. And you can actually write a letter of gratitude even to your loved one who has passed away. Write it and keep it and see how therapeutic it is. How not just happy, grateful you will feel, kind you will feel to yourselves, and how so many of the positive healing emotions will ensue. And gratitude visits, if you're suffering from or grieving from ill health of somebody else, or loss of a job, or loss of property, with many other reasons, a gratitude visit again helps so much, both for you and for the person. And try and pause every time when you know now how, without any reason or realm, just one memory, how it can trigger either happiness or puts you into that deep sorrow of having lost a loved one years back. At that time, pause, breathe, and appreciate that relationship, and see how magic can happen. I'm just gonna wait here, and there are plenty more only during the Q&A session I can take up. So what are the yardsticks? When we develop an attitude of gratitude, and if we are grieving in a healthy manner to be evolving, that makes us kind. And that is the most important yardstick. Is it making us kind? Or are we being irritated because of the sadness? This will be a sure yardstick to know if you're grieving in a healthy manner or not. And you might ask, is it possible to be kind? Say, yes, it is possible to be kind each time and every time. If you make kindness as a religion, as our present Dalai Lama says, he says, my religion is simple. My religion is to be kind. Kindness is my religion, he says. So we can belong to that religion of being kind. And are we being compassionate and empathetic along with being kind? Another yardstick. And to understand the deeper connectedness, interconnectedness, and interdependence of beings and also non-beings. This is again the most scientific way of understanding the deeper connectedness of people. And because of the interconnectedness, the interdependence too. I will just stop at that. Again, we can go deeper into that, but I will stop and conclude. So the prescription for being grateful is to develop an attitude of gratitude and to be mindful, to be in the present moment, here and now and here. Also, say what you need to say and say when you need to say, and say it with kindness and love. Just saying is not enough, but follow it up with action. And the final take-home message I'm going to leave you with is grief is not a problem to be solved, nor a disease to be treated, but an opportunity to evolve. So live life meaningfully and purposefully and take this opportunity to evolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Usha Ma, for those insights and the scientific understanding of what people are going through. There have been a few questions on the chat, so I'm going to just try and go through some of that.
Sure.
One of the individuals who would like to remain anonymous, and I think, you know, a lot of this has a lot of scientific and rational background, but obviously when somebody is within the realm of grief and unable to look further, it becomes very difficult to have an attitude of gratitude. And this particular participant has lost her only child, her mum, and her husband in the last 2 years. And firstly, our hearts go out to you and we are deeply sorry for your loss. And she says that all I hear is that I have a purpose, but she can't find a purpose and is tired of this existence. How I understand we won't be able to go deeply into that because that would obviously take a long time, but just as a starting point, where should somebody in this position actually start off from? And I'm going to extend that just a little bit because it not only relates to that, but with the degree of violence experienced in this country and the loss of life through violence, that acceptance and that gratitude becomes very difficult to channel when you have a perpetrator that has wrongfully done something. And when you ask the question why this has happened, and when you try and go deeper, it's very difficult to actually come to grips with the answers related to those type of situations.
You're absolutely right, Shivani, and really sorry for your loss. I'll answer it in a two-part way. One is, it is possible to give a long answer, but not right now, especially the situation. If somebody is trying to figure out the purpose, don't take me wrong, it is not that simple to figure out one's purpose. And many a times it is not possible to figure out one's purpose by oneself. This is where you might need some external help. And we go for help not because we are weak, but we want to remain strong. And we want to remain meaningful for ourselves, especially in a situation like this. So a short answer and a long answer is this particular person. If you need that extra help to figure out the purpose, Shivani, we can try and give that time. Maybe we can, I'll be able to spend some time with this person to be able to help figure out the purpose in one's life, especially in a case like this. And the other answer, the two-part answer for everything what you said is, yes, especially what is happening in this society, to be grateful. Just, I have been saying, keep saying, it is not going to be possible. I know that. That is why I'm also saying that we need to learn to forgive. I am not talking from a moralistic perspective, but from a highly scientific perspective. And I will not go into, purposefully, I will not go into even a bit of forgiveness here, because especially the society needs to learn to forgive even before learning to develop an attitude of gratitude, is what I have learned observing many people traveling both in Joburg and in Durban, and going to many corporates and hospital settings here, in the meeting with both corporate staff and medical professionals. I can assure you, we need to learn to forgive in the scientific manner. That is where the answer lies for many of the things.
Thank you. I've actually volunteered your services, Ushama, even before you've offered it. So hopefully that can help. Some of the other questions are related to, as we spoke about, the change in life status, like pension and retirement and retrenchment, for example. How do you deal with that? You know, somebody listening to this particular situation where I've just now compared somebody's terrible grief and loss, and you now talk about retrenchment and pension, somebody immediately has to think, oh, well, it's not that important, but the devastation and the defining of ourselves by jobs and careers becomes the very essence or description of what we think. So how does it relate to those individuals asking those questions?
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right, Shivani. Nothing is simple or not as important. For the brain, it cannot tell it's a loss of a loved one, loss of money, loss of property, none of that. The brain will do its job in that sense. As long as we are feeling intensely, any type of emotion, the brain doesn't care about the reason for it. So we can never say it's our not understanding how the brain works and the mind works. We come up with such statements which are judgmental. So when we go deeper, see, for somebody might have lost a loved one. If somebody does not feel intensely, it doesn't matter. But losing a job, somebody can take it so seriously because of a reason that can be even more than losing a life. So we will never ever compare like that. So here again, couple of things. First is to know the purpose of our life is what is going to help us, and what do we what is the purpose of my life right now is what will also help us to take a job that may be more stressful than the previous one, or less salary from the previous one, when we know the purpose and meaning of our life. This is where we will know it's only the title that we have lost. Yes, maybe for a while the amount of money that we need to lead a certain type of life may not be there. These are the adjustments we need to make. But having faith in ourselves, having faith in our ability, we need to move on, saying that this is a short term. No matter what, I am going to end up with the job that I would want it to be. Going in the positive way is where you're going to help attract or figure out many different possibilities by being positive and having faith in oneself. And if we lose that faith in ourselves, and if we look at the situation in a negative way, we will not be able to see various options and choices. Again, the science behind it. Because of the negativity bias, we will look at the worldview as with two options in a binary format: either this job or no job. This is the title I had, so I have to get an equal one somewhere else, and in this small place I cannot find. These are the only two ways the mind will work. But if we look at it in a positive way, this is my opportunity to make whatever changes. I know it is easier said than done, is what many people are thinking about it, but it can be done. It is not about easy or difficulty, but having faith in oneself. I can assure you, having lived in US for so many decades, it is not any time that that unemployment thing is, or the pink slip is hanging on one's head. Many of the Americans live through this without any other external circumstances. So I'm also saying this out of having lived through that and having seen and helped through many people. Most difficult, but to stay positive, especially when you have lost the job, to stay positive and to make use of that time to upskill yourself is even harder, but That is the only way.
Thank you. Another question is, how do you differentiate between acceptance and resignation?
Oh, huge difference.
Something as opposed to be resigned to fate.
Yeah. One is a passive one, another one is an active one. Acceptance through understanding. You can also accept, based on destiny, karma theory. That is a passive one. But accepting with full understanding is an active process. If it's a passive one, we will never ever learn, let alone evolve. Only when we accept it with full understanding and go towards making changes happen so as to create our own future, because we have that power to create our own future. We have the power to create our own destiny. As a matter of fact, one of the monks who was a contemporary of Swami Vivekananda, he was a mathematician, mathematics professor turned into a monk. He says, very short definition for destiny. He says, thought is another name for destiny. So profound. You could figure it out. So we need to believe that it is possible to create our own future, create our own destiny the way we want it to be.
Okay, there's another question about grief. Is grief a result or consequence of attachment? And naturally, if we are attached to somebody, the grief is more profound, and you can identify with it.
Yes and no. Grief is a natural process. If it is due to attachment in an unhealthy manner, it will result in an unhealthy form of grief. We all need to learn to be attached, but in a detached way. If we cannot learn how to love people deeply and how to be attached with our closed ones, let it give some grief to begin with. Yes, we cannot start off with detached attachment. That does not mean we should not be attached to people. Be detached. I do not believe in that, because it is not a healthy way also. We need to be attached so deeply, so it will, of course, it will hurt. It's a process. Once we know the theoretical aspect, we will be able to know how to detach ourselves. Then learn to detach ourselves. Why? Just so we can love the person even more deeply. That is detached attachment.
So those are some of the questions on the chat. One of the other techniques we needed to ask about was that once, if you're engulfed in grief, it's often very difficult to try and see rationally or mindfully beyond them. Are there what psychologists call distraction techniques that people can use to take them out into a place where the rational and mindfulness can actually start to work?
Yeah. There are many tools. For me, simple thing is first the intellectual understanding. Otherwise, it is just a tool. Somebody says, you do this, it will help. Without the understanding of how it works or why it should be done, it remains as a tool. It works for some time and it doesn't work later. But with complete understanding like this, we can make anything as a tool. That is the beauty of it, especially with respect to grieving. You can just focus on your breath and then bring back the memories of that person to be able to, you have to train. It cannot just happen once. This is the training part. You can bring back the most beautiful memories, or it could be crying. You can make crying, but knowingly you have to do all of this. All of this we are doing in an emotional manner, without cognizant of all these. We don't even have to change anything. Whatever we are trying to go through our own process, if we understand the science behind it and not do it in an emotional way, but in a conscious, cognizant manner, it is this knowledge is what is going to help. And I always say, when we are grieving, we can also be a part of a bigger picture to help others too. For example, we have done this in India when somebody loses their loved one, let us say, because of stroke, let us say. And we have a way of bringing awareness, stroke awareness, to the public. So that family arranges stroke awareness talks in that whole year. So we go do stroke awareness talks for wherever people arrange in memory of somebody. That's also a way of grieving. It will also help others in order to be aware of whatever the illness that their loved one's life was lost. If it is something due to cancer, to be bringing awareness, or to run support group meetings. And even for grieving, if some family is grieving, to form a support group meeting so that they will be helped and others can also be helped in the same way. These are even innovative and novel ways, at least in some of the cultures here. It will help us and help others too, you know.
Definitely. I think you learned through the questions that I asked. I think one of the other aspects, since many of the participants are devotees as well, is to talk about God's will.
What about God's will?
That's usually the comforting phrase that's given to one during a loss, and it's usually faced with a lot of anger, no matter how devotional.
That shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
God's will is very highly therapeutic. It's the most powerful, but if it is associated with anger, then we have not understood God's will. We are just using it as a phrase, like as I'm saying, that thank you, that, we're grateful to God, and saying thank you in a mechanical way, then it's just an emotional process or a mechanical way. If we truly understand that term, then it is never associated with anger. It is fully accepted, and it is not associated with resignation. True acceptance. That is real faith. And that is so powerful. I cannot describe that at all.
Well, thank you for those comments. If there's any other questions that needs to be vocalized or shared, please, the opportunity is now. In the meantime, while you are thinking, I think, Ushama, you would agree that this was an important topic, given the fact that there are the many participants and questions, and unfortunately, it's not a topic that can be covered in one session, but hopefully it gives everybody some starting point to work from, to find a way out. And I want to sincerely thank you, because I know that this is a particular topic that you did especially for us. And I hope that's given you now also an extension into the topics that you will be taking forward also. So I want to thank everybody for their participation. Dr. Vasthare will be with us for only a short while longer, is unfortunately due to leave on Thursday. So if anybody wants the opportunity to chat to her, please try and do so before that. And we'll be in touch. I've given some of the contact details for the Ramakrishna Clinic and information thereof, and Dr. Vasthare's information will also be shared on those platforms as well. I think it's just left for us to say thank you for the participation, and a special thank you to Dr. Rajesh Singh, Sanjeev, and Shohan for getting through all the load shedding and power shedding glitches and helping this talk come through. So very appreciative for those efforts. Thank you, everybody. Have a mindful evening. And during this time of remembrance of our ancestors, when we asked for this topic, we didn't realize it was going to be during the period of Pitra Paksh either, but it also
That's
happened
right.
in such a manner. So I hope that everybody has this remembrance and time for remembrance in a more mindful way, and to go on and look forward and upward. Thank you very much. Usha, thank you again for your insight. It's been invaluable.
Thank you.